So hello everyone, welcome for joining us in our last webinar, Sharing the Stage in Building with Nature. As you can see, please select View Active Cameras and also keep your sound, microphone and video off. Then we will now start with our trailer.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to the last webinar on EcoShape, as Sophie already said. My name is Luca Sittoni. I'm program manager of EcoShape, and I will be the host of this webinar together with Sophie. Sophie, the word to you.
Yeah, thank you, Luca. Sorry, I was so excited that we were going to start that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sophie de Reus, a marine ecologist at HaskoningDHV, and today host together with Luca.
Yes, so we already gave you some, let's say, some guidelines for this webinar. As you see, unfortunately today we are again in our rooms. In our office, we cannot go to the office, so we are respecting the COVID, but we decide to still go ahead with this webinar. There are some rules, as we already explained, that we would like to follow to make sure that we have a good webinar together. I will repeat it once again. So everybody, please stay on mute and have the camera out. There is opportunity to send questions on the chat. We really encourage you to interact with us and send us as many questions as you can. There is also the opportunity for you to interact actively with us by unmuting you and sharing your camera if you wish during the discussion. Important, let's keep the active cameras on, so you will see only the people that are speaking and not a lot of black box on your screen. We will do our best to keep this webinar running smoothly and on time. We hope we all can share the videos and come in at the right place. We are going to do our best to do a great webinar in this digital environment anyhow. And next slide, thank you. So this is the third and last webinar of the series of EcoShape, Set, Take and Share the Stage for Upscaling Building with Nature. We did start a couple of months ago with what we call Set the Stage, based on the enablers, capacity building, institutional embedding. These are six enablers we developed as EcoShape during this last few years. We continue with the second webinar on Take the Stage, in which we really talk about the hardcore science, let's say, of building with nature, technology and system knowledge, and then management, monitoring, maintenance. And we finish today with what we call Share the Stage. So we build a podium, let's say, and now we want to share with everybody with the two webinars of multi-stakeholder approach and business case. And we did choose to present those two enablers together because multi-stakeholder approach is not only important and critical to, let's say, share nature-based solution, but we hope to show today that it's also very important to make as attractive as possible business case. So we really think that those two webinars go together. So we hope that you stay with us until the end in these two parts. Before we continue, also if you missed the last two webinars, they are registered and they can be found at the link in our website. Now next slide, thank you. Now just one slide for those who don't know yet and didn't follow the previous webinar. What is EcoShape? It's a consortium of engineering, consultant, knowledge institute, contractor, and NGOs, and we work together to develop pre-competitive knowledge and sharing knowledge about building with nature, and that's what we like to do today as well. We've worked together for 12 years. In project knowledge development and pilot projects, and we just published a book. That's the book I have here, Sophie. We have the book here. It just came out in the Netherlands, and next week It will be launched internationally as well. And if you want to get the book, there's also the links provided on this slide and at our website. So EcoShape is about to transition to a new form, and that's not a cliffhanger to stay with us the whole webinar, because our director Henk Nieboer will be the last speaker of the second session and will tell us a bit more about what we've learned in these 12 years and where we go after that. This is a bit the introduction for today. I think the word to Sophie now, who will tell us a bit more about the first part of the webinar and about the multi-stakeholder, the enabler multi-stakeholders.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Luca. So now, hope you're all warmed up for the first enabler about multi-stakeholder approach, which is quite an important enabler, because building with nature can rarely be implemented by a single party. For a successful project requires stakeholder engagement from the start throughout the design, implementation, operation, and maintenance phase. So actually to the whole project. Key aspects to consider are the cooperation between stakeholders and integral multifunctional approaches, the coalition forming and co-creation approaches to create shared ambition with all the stakeholders, and stakeholder assessment and engagement are also quite important. To explain a bit more about this enabler, we have some nice, interesting guests who want to share their experiences with you. We have the topics are from all around the world. We will start in the north of the Netherlands with a general introduction and a practical example. Then we continue on a practical case study on an active community involvement in Indonesia. And then we will cross the world to the United States to finish over there. So now I will introduce the first two speakers of this webinar, which are Martin Baptist and Emiel Hakvoort. Martin Baptist is an ecologist working at Wageningen Marine Research and who has a PhD in civil engineering. He is interested in the harmonization of human use with natural processes. He is an expert on the interaction between infrastructural work and ecology, and is a leading scientist in building with nature. Emiel Hakvoort is the program manager of the Eems-Dollard 2050 program. In this program, 16 program partners work together on 14 projects to have one common goal, and that goal is to restore the ecological value in the Eems-Dollard estuary, but to keep room for economic development. They will tell you something about the Marconi project in the Netherlands, but we first will start with a video about the Eems-Dollard 2050 to give you a small impression of the area.
Het Eems-Dollard-gebied in Groningen. Een gebied dat deel uitmaakt van het werelderfgoed Waddenzee. Een gebied waar Nederland en Duitsland samen verantwoordelijk voor zijn. De Eems-Dollard is een uniek natuurgebied, een zogenaamd estuarium. Een gebied waar de Eems ophoudt en de zee begint. De open verbinding met zee maakt dat de Eems-Dollard aantrekkelijk is voor industrie. Economie en ecologie kunnen prima hand in hand gaan, mits er een goed evenwicht is. Dat is nu niet het geval. Uit onderzoek blijkt dat de natuur ernstig verstoord is. Met het programma Eems-Dollard 2050 gaan we hier verandering in brengen. Dat doen we samen met veel verschillende partijen, zoals overheden, gemeenten, waterschappen, bedrijven en natuurorganisaties. Samen bedenken we nieuwe, slimme oplossingen. En dat is behoorlijk bijzonder. Er zit te veel slib in het water van de Eems-Dollard. Planten en dieren kunnen er niet meer goed leven. Vissen kunnen niet meer goed rondtrekken. Er zijn te weinig geleidelijke overgangen tussen zoet en zoutwater en tussen land en water. Dat is niet goed voor de vissen en de vogels in het gebied. De Eems-Dollard is naast een natuurgebied een plek voor industrie en bedrijvigheid. De Groningse dijken in het gebied moeten voor de veiligheid zorgen, nu en in de toekomst. In het programma Eems-Dollard 2050 werken overheden, natuur- en milieuorganisaties en bedrijven samen aan verschillende doelen. Herstellen van de natuur. Zorgen voor waterveiligheid. Kansen en mogelijkheden creëren voor de economie, recreatie en toerisme. Om de bijzondere natuur in de Eems-Dollard te herstellen en beschermen, treffen we verschillende maatregelen die een bijzondere keten vormen. We herstellen natuurlijke leefgebieden langs de randen van de Eems-Dollard en maken nieuwe broed- en rustplaatsen voor vogels en nieuwe overgangen voor vissen. Daarnaast versterken we de dijken en maken we nieuwe, slimme dijken. Zoals de brede groene dijk en de dubbele dijk die waterveiligheid met zilte landbouw en natuur combineert. We halen overtollig slib uit het water, zodat het minder troebel wordt. We maken kleirijperijen, waar slib omgezet wordt in klei die voor de dijken gebruikt wordt. Verder passen we slib nuttig toe door het verbeteren van landbouwgronden en doen we proeven om van het slib bouwblokken te persen. We voeren een pilot uit om slib ook weer vast te leggen langs kwelders, zodat het niet meer rondzweeft in het water. Zo maken we het water schoner. Zo herstellen we de overgangen van water naar land en van zoet naar zout. Zo werken we ook aan de regionale economie en leefbaarheid van het gebied. Zodat we in 2050 weer een gezonde Eems-Dollard hebben.
Let me now ask Martin to put on his camera and his microphone. Yeah, and share screen. Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you. Yes, I would like to tell something about the Marconi waterfront project, which is part of the projects in the Eems-Dollard estuary. And I try to skip to the next slide, but it seems a bit slow. Oh, here it is. Yeah. And I start with a proposition, that is that without a multi-stakeholder approach, the Marconi waterfront project at Delfzijl would have never succeeded. It is that important. I'm not going to explain too much about the project, but it's in front of the Delfzijl municipality with a beach, a salt marsh park, and a pioneer salt marsh as a nature-based solution. Well, there are two factors really important. The first is that the project went from one to multiple stakeholders, and that was because in the beginning the plans of Delfzijl for waterfront development failed multiple times as they proved unrealizable without wider stakeholder participation. And this was in the beginning of the 2000s. But then in 2009, some 50 key persons were interviewed, and that started a multi-level, multi-organization steering group, given the call sign Marconi. And then in 2012, the parties signed a Marconi Memorandum of Understanding and actually extended the number of stakeholders. And this really brought momentum in the project. But actually, there was a second factor really important. That is that the project went from local to regional scale. And because during this Marconi formation and the gathering of the stakeholders, there were other multi-stakeholder processes that took place on the ecological quality of the Eems estuary, which we have just seen the movie. For instance, there was a Dutch-German integrated management plan for the Eems. There was a program started, Ecology and Economy in Balance. And last but not least, the program ED 2050 started. And really crucial for later success was that the local Marconi vision was adhering to the regional objectives on the Eems-Dollard ecological quality. So the project went from local to regional, and the project went from one stakeholder, the municipality, to multi-stakeholders. Well, I am a scientist. I'm an ecologist working for Wageningen University and Research. So I was wondering, what does science tell us about these processes and about what has happened? And I would like to give you a very short explanation on the framework for a social ecological system, and SES, and also the framework of the IUCN, the Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions that came out last year in 2020. Well, first of all, the social ecological system framework. It is actually quite complex, but it consists of 4 major parts. And of course, it's a social part here on the right, and it's an ecological part here on the left. In short, it consists of resource systems, or well, the biggest system is the Eems-Dollard estuary with the Eems River, and there are multiple subsystems like the Dollard, and some systems have a Nature 2000 status, etc. So that's the resource system. And then, of course, the resource system contains resource units, and in this case, the units are salt marshes and tidal flats and shellfish and shrimp and seals and fish, but also major waterways for navigation and shipping. That's also a unit of the resource. And then there are governance systems. Well, in this case, the estuary is managed by many institutions under European legislation, the directives, national legislation, local, etc. And of course, there are actors, many actors. The estuary is used for shipping, for industry, also for fisheries and for tourism, of course. So that is really, the Eems estuary is a prime example of a social ecological system. And yes, that is embedded in bigger systems, a bigger social, economic and political setting. It is embedded in related ecosystems. But what is happening in the middle? Well, that is actually where all the interactions between all the parts are taking place. This is where the focal action situation takes place, and where the interactions lead to outcomes. And in this case, the outcome was a nature-based solution for this Marconi waterfront. So how came that about? Well, for that, I would like to take you, well, shortly again, to the framework of the IUCN, the Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions, which consists of 8 criteria and also many sub-criteria. And of course, this came out in 2020. So in retrospect, when looking back, we can see, did we fulfill these criteria? Is this a real nature-based solution? And I say it is. So in the center, it starts with the societal challenges. Well, here the societal challenge was to make the town of Delfzijl attractive to residents and visitors with a new waterfront. Okay. And then 2, you see design at scale. Well, I told you about it. It was scaled up to the estuary scale, the regional scale, and that is really important for nature-based solutions to find the correct scale, and usually the landscape, the larger scale. It was developed with a salt marsh contributing to a biodiversity net gain, number 3. It was linked to a capital dredging project for a navigation channel in this estuary, which brought the sand for the Marconi project. So that was really increasing economic feasibility, number 4. It was responding to a variety of stakeholders in an inclusive governance setting, number 5 in this graph. Of course, the whole project was balancing trade-offs, number 6. Trade-offs with other projects, but also trade-offs with the Natura 2000 legislation. And then EcoShape was given the opportunity to carry out a field experiment on salt marsh construction, and it is really delivering evidence-based monitoring that helps in adaptive management. And so that is number 7. And then 8, last but not least, mainstreaming and sustainability. Actually, we are doing that now because EcoShape is studying this project, and it's scaling up the project and scaling out this nature-based solution and giving you the opportunity to talk about. So yes, this is a true nature-based solutions project, and we are now working in finding the link between the socio-ecological system, where this all is happening, and the nature-based solutions. But that is for a later meeting. Thank you all for watching.
Well, thank you, Martin. I'll take over from here. I try to share my screen. I hope this works fine. Okay. If you don't see this screen right, please let me know, but I'll start.
That's okay, Emiel.
Okay, thank you, Martin, and thank you, EcoShape, for having me here. My name is Emiel Hakvoort. I'm the program manager of the program Eems-Dollard 2050. Before the presentation of Martin, you've seen a video of the Eems-Dollard and the Eems estuary. The balance between ecology and economy, that is what matters in this region. And it's a unique area. We only have two estuaries left in the Netherlands, the Schelde and the Eems. But the ecological value is under threat. But it's also of economic value. And we need to reassure that the balance is okay with that. The next 6 minutes, I will focus on the points mentioned on this sheet. But what's the issue? In a nutshell, while studies show that the turbidity level has increased over the decades. If you look at the color of the water, it looks brown, even more on the Eems River, on the German side. This is mainly caused by land reclamations, the change to an artificial coastline, and widening the fairways. And in 2015, research gave insights into promising ways to improve the ecological quality. These can be reached by structurally reducing the amount of fine sediment. We set up 14 projects to achieve this, pilot projects, because first we have to learn how it works in such a dynamic system. But first things first. And first thing is organizing the partners and the participants and create a joint responsibility. On day one, you have to start together. Joint responsibility, one for all for one. It's the result of a joint effort of national and local parties. The province of Groningen, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, the Ministry of Management and Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality have prepared the program in coordination with all the other parties. And this program builds on this unique dialogue between local and national governments on program scale, but also on project scale. I think Martin told that very well, how that worked in Marconi. And it is a unique dialogue between the government, industries, nature, and environmental organizations. They hold themselves jointly responsible for developing a healthy ecosystem that's in balance with economic development. This cooperation is the main precondition for this program and also the precondition for success. The task of restoring the estuary system is too challenging and too complex for one organization alone. And the main message of the agreement is a vital and resilient ecosystem, and that forms the foundation for economic development. The strategy, how we work. We have a vision, ecological vision, that gives us direction on longer term. The vision means an estuary with sufficient sedimentation capacity, natural dynamics, and consisting of vital habitats and transition zones. I think the video showed us some insight of that vision. And we also offer a structural approach and has an adaptive character. It links short-term concrete measures to longer-term vision. You need to be adaptive on this. You can't predict what's happening over 10 years. Climate change. I only have to mention this theme. Every 5 years, we evaluate and update and improve the program. Not only the content, but also the way we work. It's learning by doing, not only the content, but also the way we work. Step-by-step approach is necessary to cope with uncertainties. The future conceals itself in the years to come, and the road, it's not a straight line. Multiple challenges in the same area demands a smart connection between them, a great opportunity to create synergy and create more value. Removing sediment from the system is the most important strategy to reduce turbidity. Dredged sediment from the harbors Eemshaven and Deltares is being used for different challenges. In this program, we explore new ways. We bring sediment on land to build blocks, improve soil, or make building blocks from sediment. Subsidence near Deltares isn't a big issue. We started a pilot project to learn if sediment can be used to raise the land. What I would like to tell you is that it's not only a nature program. You have to connect with other issues, with other challenges. We'll investigate how sediment can be applied to land or new nature inside the dike by creating a hole in the dike. Maybe you think, how safe is that? Water safety, creating a hole in the dike. This is where the twin dike concept comes in. This is one of the 14 projects in this program. You know, the left picture is Hansje Brinkers, the man who put his finger in the dike. It's an old story in the Netherlands. Regional water boards and the National Rijkswaterstaat face the challenge to keep the Netherlands safe from flooding, now and in the future. Raising our dikes is one strategy, but there are more. Where possible within the Eems-Dollard region, we choose for new dike concepts that also create benefits for man and nature. Man and nature. Nature that helps restoring ecological issues in the estuary. Okay, there's a hole in the primary dike. Within the tides, seawater flows in and out. Luckily, there's a second dike to keep it safe. Actually, it's nothing new. Before we built the dikes, it was the way it worked. But also in the future, with rising sea level, collaboration with the water authorities is a key factor. We as partners have the task to make the Eems-Dollard region resistant to climate change in cohesion with safety, water safety, and ecology. Another example is that different projects are part of a supply chain. For example, is the Green Dike project. Different projects can be part of the supply chain. For instance, dike reinforcement is depending on 3 different partners and projects: dredging, clay riping, and monitoring and building dike with clay. 3 different partners, organizations work together in this chain. Well, I picked out some examples, but I would like to end with this sheet. What have we learned? The first 5 years gave us new technical insight that affects the ecosystem. Every year we publish a monitoring report with the latest insight. I started this presentation with a joint responsibility in collaboration between partners and stakeholders. Well, joint responsibility, especially during the adaptation phase, when new insights are being integrated, and to keep the support base for long term is necessary. Keep investing in the joint responsibility. And when issues occur, and we do have issues with our partners, but we discuss, we collaborate, and agree by using the mutual gain approach. What's in it for all of us, not for one of us. Discuss about the common goals, not the individual solutions. Clear agreements between the project partners, also a big lesson for us. Solid contracts, agreements is necessary. We also have our own challenges to cope with and where we're responsible for. For example, the beneficial use of sediment chain has several partners with different challenges combined with a joint responsibility for restoring the Eems estuary. Be open to new opportunities to create synergy. Try to connect with relevant local issues, but also keep in mind your program scope. Synergy helps to create more support base. And more support base, maybe you will gain new insight and experience along the road. It's more fun. Thank you for your attention for now.
Thank you, Emiel and Martin. There are quite a few questions coming from the chat. We are just a bit behind schedule, but I do want to ask a quick question to both of you. And I think we can summarize 3 questions together. So how broad is the stakeholder system outside, let's say, the natural system? And in this specific case, what's the role of your neighbors as Germans in the stakeholder approach? You have 10 seconds to answer this question. I'm just kidding.
Well, we can't do this by our own, and so we collaborate with the Germans also in another part of this program. It's almost a project on itself, but we also have to keep in mind that the issues on German side are a little different than on the Netherlands side. So we have to accept and to understand each other's own challenges. And also we have our discussions, but we have a constructive platform where we can talk with them. We have short lines. We can pick up the phone. I think that's the best way to keep in touch with each other. Invest in each other's goals, in each other's interests, and that's what we are doing with our German colleagues.
Thank you, Emiel. Anything to add, Martin?
Well, very short. We are talking about this social ecological system in which everything is connected to everything. And so, yes, for sure, they should be involved. And actually, they are involved, not as an official partner to the Marconi project, but yeah, we have short lines. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both for your presentation and answering this question. Then I will introduce our next two speakers to you. These are Pieter from Eijk and Apri, Susanto, Astra, which both work at Wetlands International. Pieter van Eijk is head of the Delta and Coast program within Wetlands International. He oversees numerous international projects on biodiversity conservation, integrated coastal zone management, urban master planning, and coastal risk reduction and adaptation. And Apri works for Wetlands International Indonesia. He's the project coordinator of the Building with Nature Indonesia project, where he focuses on the relation to community assistance and policy dialogue with the governance. Pieter and Apri will tell you something about the Biorights in Demak, Indonesia. Apri could unfortunately not join us, but he has recorded his presentation, which will follow after Pieter's presentation. So Pieter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophie. Well, I think we've seen in the previous presentation that involving local stakeholders and particularly also local communities is absolutely key to the success of any engineering project. They are important end users. They're stakeholders that bring very different perspectives to the table, and clearly on the basis of that, it's absolutely critical that those stakeholders are engaged in all stages of design, implementation, and maintenance of engineering projects. And in the Netherlands and other developed countries, we have rather proper frameworks for ensuring such engagement. There's governance frameworks in place that actually require local stakeholders and communities to engage. And the communities themselves are in many cases very well organized and able to voice their ideas and voice their concerns. But how does that work in developing countries or in emerging economies where the governance frameworks are often not in place and where communities often have a very weak voice in society? Well, unfortunately, we see that that engagement often takes place not at all, or sometimes in a limited manner. And that has repercussions for the success of engineering projects. Projects are often suboptimally designed due to a lack of community engagement. A lack of ownership of communities in the design of projects also makes it a problem for those who develop and design engineering projects, because they lack a license to operate, as they do not involve communities sufficiently. And clearly that brings about all kinds of problems with licensing, causing delays in project implementation, increased costs, and in some cases even human rights issues that have a big impact on the success of a project. So essentially this means that there's more responsibility amongst those who develop and commission engineering projects in those countries to make a proactive effort to have communities proactively and properly engaged. And there are several ways of doing so, and I would like to share some perspectives of what would be a proper way to ensure that those local voices are taken on board. Essentially, we see two approaches of doing so. One is to ensure proper community representation during planning and decision making, having them as a voice around the table. But we see, particularly in developing countries where there is limited funding to invest in very large-scale infrastructures, that there is also a strong opportunity to bring communities in as implementers of engineering projects, where they can provide their own resources, their own manpower, their own traditional innovations as a complement to engineering projects. But of course that requires those communities to be incentivized to become part of engineering projects and for their opportunity costs to be covered by the developers of projects, so that they actually have the means to engage. Starting with community representation, there are several ways to organize this, and as Wetlands International, an NGO that works internationally with many vulnerable communities, we see a strong role of helping communities to have their voices heard in projects that are developed. And that means that as Wetlands International, we typically take a role of listening to local community groups, capturing their ideas and perspectives, and then being part as kind of connectors in discussions and design process for engineering projects to make sure that their voices are heard. But at the same time, what we see is that there sometimes also is hesitance to bring NGOs on board, because some groups are vocal, some groups are activistic, so many developers of engineering projects actually want to steer away from NGOs and develop their project on their own. And it wouldn't be a surprise, of course, that as Wetlands International, we would strongly suggest to have NGOs around the table in a very early stage of design, despite the challenges that might bring and the different perspectives that might come to the table, simply because having these NGOs as connectors early on could save a lot of problems in a later stage and could really help the different voices to be heard. Ultimately, of course, it shouldn't be the NGOs doing this only. It would even be better to have communities sitting around the table themselves. But it's not always easy, because community groups are not always well organized and therefore don't know or are not able to have their voice heard and recognized. Developers of engineering projects, we feel, can play a very strong role in having those communities strengthened, the capacities built, the groups organized, so that once a project is getting up to speed, it's easy to reach out to the communities. And I'm not saying that this is not happening. There's many efforts, of course, to have communities providing their perspectives. But what we see in international projects is that there are many mistakes being made. Often communities are seen as an uniform group. So having one perspective from a community group is seen as the whole stories. But clearly within a single community, within a single village, there are many voices that need to be heard and many different perspectives. So ensuring that all voices are represented in these dialogues is critical, and ensuring gender balanced approaches and having different social classes and professions sitting around the table is absolutely critical. And again, that requires acquiring a proper understanding of how communities work and how they can be brought around the table. Then if you get enthused about engaging communities in your project, how can you actually bring them into the implementation? Well, we have seen several mechanisms where this is being tried to get communities around the table. And a very well-known approach is the cash for work approach, where communities receive small funds so that they can provide wage labor. But it's an easy transaction, but at the same time, it also often doesn't build ownership, because communities just go in there for the cash and might not really own and care for the project in the long term. Another mechanism that has gained a lot of attention is payment for ecosystem services, where resource owners, local groups on the ground, are paid to provide certain environmental services that are part of an engineering solution. You can, for example, think of a landowner that is being paid for stabilizing a hill slope by planting forest on that hill slope and thereby preventing erosion and mudslides. But again, there's a problem there, because for this to work out, land use arrangements should be clear, and local groups should have at least basic capacities to enter in these kind of long-term agreements. Wetlands International has developed an innovative instrument called the Biorights approach that tries to provide a proper alternative to those mechanisms, where you work with vulnerable groups, where you build their capacities, and where you provide them through a microfinance scheme the means to engage over the long term in the implementation of engineering projects and other projects involved in managing natural resources. And this next slide shows you how it works. Essentially, it's a financial transaction, not different from microfinance, where there's one party that provides loans to local community groups. But rather than the local community groups providing a payment back with interest after having spent their microfinance loan on a business, the communities pay back in the form of active services towards restoring the natural environment. So in return for their loan, they can, for example, implement measures to stop erosion along the coastline or restore a mangrove forest. And rather than them having paid back their loan, we check after termination of a contractual period if the conservation measures have been successful. And if so, the loan is converted into a definitive payment for the community. There are several advantages to this approach. One, you provide a coverage of the opportunity costs that communities incur to engage in an engineering project, but you also provide them the finances they can use to convert to a more sustainable land use that can enhance resilience of a coastal area. And lastly, of course, by providing this transaction, you really make communities partners in the implementation of an engineering project and thereby cut costs and ensure long-term ownership. So we have been implementing this Biorights approach in the Building with Nature project in Demak in Indonesia on the north coast of Java, where we are working through an integrated approach to stop coastal erosion that is threatening about 60,000 people. And I would like now to hand over to my colleague Apri Susanto from the Wetlands International Indonesia office, who has presented his story digitally because he couldn't be here now. So I will stop the screen share and let's listen to his presentation. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Continuing what has been presented by my colleague Pieter, I will present the implementation of Biorights mechanism as part of community engagement program in Building with Nature Indonesia project that we conducted in Demak District, Central Java Province, Indonesia. Community is one of the main stakeholders in Building with Nature Indonesia project because they are the implementer in the field and they will maintain the program sustainability. Therefore, we involve them from the beginning, from project planning and design, implementation in the field, until monitoring and evaluation. The stage of this community engagement process are shown in the slide. This process takes a long time because it requires intense communication to ensure that we as a project understand the needs of community and vice versa, the community already understand the purpose of project implementing in their area. Biorights is a microfinance mechanism that connects environmental conservation activities with the economy of surrounding community. In Building with Nature Indonesia project, we connect mangrove rehabilitation with environmentally friendly aquaculture. How does this mechanism work? As shown on the slide, as a project we provide funding, knowledge, and assistance, while community contributes by providing ponds, work time, and labor. Furthermore, we agreed with a package deal consisting of 7 activities carried out in the field. After the monitoring and evaluation stage, if the community group succeed in fulfill the indicator of success, the loan funds will turn into grants. On policy and advocacy activity, we encourage community groups to be more actively involved in the policy planning process at the village until district government levels. Currently, through Bintoro Forum, which has been active in voicing environmental issues such as mangrove rehabilitation, tidal flooding, and land subsidence more broadly. This map is the location of Building with Nature Indonesia project activities in Demak district. We work with 11 community groups in 9 coastal villages with a total membership of around 260 people. Polygons of different colors on the map are group members' ponds which serve as location for implementing project measures. The red line is a permeable structure that functions as a sediment trap to restore land for mangroves. We take this measure as an effort to rehabilitate mangrove in erosion-affected coastal areas. Together with Indonesia Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, we have built a 9-kilometer-long structure in Demak. Currently, ownership and maintenance are carried out by community group. MMAF has also replicated permeable structure as national program in 13 districts or cities in other parts of Indonesia. Green polygon are greenbelt ponds, where community group members have gave up their pond to be converted into mangroves by opening the pond dikes, hydrology enrichment, and trapping sediment so that mangrove can grow naturally. This activity is part of the mangrove rehabilitation effort in the coastal greenbelt. The yellow polygon is mixed mangrove aquaculture pond. This activity is part of an effort to rehabilitate mangroves in river's greenbelt, where group members make space on the side of ponds on the riverbank for mangroves to grow. Meanwhile, other parts of the pond are still used for aquaculture activities with environmentally friendly techniques. The blue polygon is a revitalized aquaculture pond. Through the Coastal Field School, we invite community to return to environmentally friendly aquaculture practice. Each group member applies in their own ponds, and because they have shown an increase in yield, they are now also spreading it to other farmers outside the group. The concept of Coastal Field School was also adopted by the Demak district government as a form of community assistance in managing coastal areas. As additional information, the support from local government has flowed to community groups assisted by Building with Nature Indonesia projects. The support is in the form of budget allocation for permeable structures maintenance, provision of seed for aquacultures, funding for development of mangrove ecotourism sites, and also policy products such as village regulation for mangrove protection in the villages. As a closing, we want to share one of our recipes for making this process work, which is that our facilitators are staying with community in the villages to directly communicate with both communities and also with the village government. We also feel the Biorights concept that we have implemented has succeeded in achieving the project targets that have been set, so that the change from coastal restoration and benefits of Biorights can be felt, especially by people living along the coast. We also see a change in the mindset of community that is more supportive on mangrove rehabilitation efforts and also best aquaculture practice in their village. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pieter and ook Apri from afar. We have time for a quick question still.
Yeah, I think there's one. There's one from the audience that be good to ask now. I think Apri touched a little bit on this, but how are the success indicators defined? Because we're already speaking about money or compensation here, I guess. Pieter, what's your experience here?
Yeah, so what you saw from Apri's presentation is that the measures in the MAC have been really co-designed with local communities, the government and other stakeholders. So there's all kinds of measures related to mangrove restoration, sustainable aquaculture practice, and the construction of the permeable dams that stop the erosion. And what we did was that when we developed the Biorights deals, we signed a contract with the community groups, 10 different groups in total. And with each group, we then, within that contract, identified what kind of measures out of that large package of work the communities would implement. And for each of those measures, we had clear indicators related to environmental performance or sustainability of the measures. And that's indeed the number of hectares of mangroves restored, the quality, the ecological quality of the mangroves over time, or for example, the type of aquaculture management activities implemented into the shrimp farms. And we implemented a joint monitoring framework with the communities, where we then, over the course of the 5-year project, together with the communities, measured success and then jointly checked compliance and performance as related to the contracts. So this is the way in which we really, throughout the process of implementation and monitoring, are setting these values and targets and measuring success together with the communities.
And if the targets are not satisfied, do the community have to pay back the interest or?
Yes, that's correct. So in that case, they have to repay the loan with interest. But what we do see is that because we sign these contracts not with individuals, but with groups, is that within those groups, there's a lot of peer pressure to perform. Because if the one individual in the group doesn't perform, all the others suffer. And we see that as a result of that, it's very rare that communities actually don't meet their contractual obligations.
Okay, now, thank you, Pieter. So it's an excellent experience from Indonesia. Sophie, I think it's time to go to the next speaker.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Pieter, and also Apri. And please, for the viewers, continue asking questions. We will try to have them on the discussion. If not, we will answer them later for you, and they will be put on the EcoShape website. With that, we go to our final presenter of this enabler, which is Justine Shapiro-Kline, which is an architect and planner within One Architecture and Urbanism in New York. She has worked across the US, but also in the Netherlands, on climate adaptation and resilience planning and infrastructure projects that bring public agencies, community, and organizers together to collaborate with processes. And she will now tell us something about Harlem, New York. Yeah, go ahead, Justine.
Terrific. Thank you, Sophie and Luca. I'm glad to be joining you today. I'm going to speak about the East Harlem Resiliency Study, a collaborative vision plan that was completed in 2018 for the New York City Parks Department. This study was intended to serve as a framework for stronger, safer, and more resilient East Harlem in the face of climate change. Creating resilience is a long-term process that starts now. It can only be achieved through collaboration between residents, local leaders, city agencies, and many others. It depends on a deep understanding of context, natural systems, built infrastructure, and social and community dynamics. East Harlem is a low-lying neighborhood with significant river frontages. Over the last century, its watercourses and wetlands have been built over and ignored, and today we see the consequences. In 2012, coastal surge from Hurricane Sandy caused extensive flooding along the waterfront. It actually could have been much worse if the tide had been higher. In reports after the storm, the city identified the need for further resilience planning in East Harlem. It's a neighborhood with a rich culture and social history that has also grappled with a legacy of disinvestment. Not only is the neighborhood vulnerable to flooding from coastal storms and precipitation, it contains critical transportation infrastructure and community assets at the waterfront and a lack of green infrastructure and open space. And it's also a place where the city anticipates adding density and housing in the coming years. The vision plan focused on identifying strategies and recommendations for adaptive solutions that respond to 4 climate-related stressors. They were sea level rise, coastal surge, rain events, and extreme heat. And the study was an opportunity to demonstrate how to link climate adaptation to urban change at a neighborhood level. Because no capital budget existed for implementation, the team focused on long-term strategies. For the purposes of the study, the area was roughly defined as the waterfront between 92nd and 154th Streets and inland areas within the 2050s projected 100-year floodplain, which includes portions of multiple community districts. And right away, you can see that hazards do not align with political boundaries. Working with stakeholders in a range of data sets, we soon learned that inundation occurs at the coast during surge events and future high tides, and it also comes from rainfall events. The team recognized that to succeed, any approach to water management must be integrated, in this case working on 3 levels, with decentralized green-blue infrastructure, stormwater management along street corridors, and a reimagined coastal edge for surge and sea level rise. Considering and building with nature is key, as is understanding urban systems. Transforming the area's legacy gray infrastructure is simply not enough. To envision a truly resilient neighborhood, we need to develop a new coalition of stakeholders and to collaborate and seek opportunities that deliver multiple benefits. Given our brief time, I'm going to speak about just one aspect of the study that conveys the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach in the long-term visioning process. If you recall the historical map I showed a couple minutes ago, it's evident that any contemporary stormwater management strategy needs to restore the area's buried water courses and wetlands. And given the extent of the challenge, the team's strategy combined green infrastructure through decentralized retention structures with gray infrastructure in the form of storage, conveyance, and pumping. On 106th Street, there's an opportunity to bring back the historical creek and to connect existing open space and vacant lots and create a new stormwater network that stretches from the Harlem Mere to the East River. It will link rooftop retention to a transformed roadway corridor that introduces street trees and bioswales. These nature corridors not only address the drainage challenge, but could also bring benefits for mitigating extreme heat, supporting biodiversity, improving public health, and enhancing community spaces. Yet, in a project such as this, it's not really enough to have a bold idea. Any future implementation will depend on advocacy from multiple stakeholders and engagement with institutional actors, as well as local communities. New York City's complexity, density, and layers of history make any project of this scale a long-term endeavor. It can be difficult to find funding and establish coordination for large-scale infrastructure. So the key to the project is both a comprehensive vision and discrete near-term actions that can be implemented by distinct actors for incremental adaptation. It was critical for the team and client agencies to utilize the study process to bring the diverse project stakeholders to the table to envision a multi-benefit and integrated approach to neighborhood resiliency, as well as leverage the process to capacitate the community to lead this long-term change. The engagement strategy strove to connect with community members and organizations across the study area. The strategy also built on an understanding that social and physical resiliency are deeply intertwined, and any climate adaptive future must address East Harlem's social, built, natural, and political dimensions together. Public workshops were an important tool to reach project stakeholders. Key inputs from this engagement included data collection about where and how residents experience climate stresses today, such as nuisance flooding and extreme heat, as well as mapping of parks, open spaces, public and private community facilities that are frequently used by residents. This input informed the identification of community assets and resources that may play a role in resilience planning. These sites were also factored into considerations for how to prioritize the implementation of interventions. Public workshop activities finally aimed at growing the community's awareness of the risks of climate change and the importance of emergency preparedness and the steps the city is currently taking, as well as resources that they're providing to increase resilience within vulnerable communities. Workshops with city agencies were another valuable tool. These were organized to facilitate dialogue between entities who have a stake in policy, planning, and neighborhood operations, for the project team to learn about related and ongoing initiatives, and to collaboratively problem solve. While they're all part of the city, the agencies don't always have venues to interact around resiliency and nature development questions. Often they possess distinct knowledge bases, missions, and portfolios, so a cross-cutting project like this one is a valuable opportunity to form new interagency coalitions and make space for co-creation. Our team hosted sessions where participants from the stakeholder agencies were sorted into interdisciplinary groups and rotated between rooms of design team members to problem solve for various challenges. Tuning stakeholder engagement strategies to their specific audiences was important throughout. I've already mentioned that social resiliency is essential and that it takes many forms. At the center of our multi-stakeholder approach was engagement with local students. The goal was to foster a culture of resilience. So we created a semester-long curriculum about climate resiliency with the objective to empower young scholars to become leaders in their community and advocates for future resilience building initiatives. Through a 6-module, 24-lesson curriculum, the scholars learned an array of mapping, sociological, scientific, and design tools for analyzing climate change impacts in the neighborhood. They worked directly with design and planning professionals on the project team, and they participated in project activities by speaking at community meetings and tabling at public events. The students also engaged in developing and implementing pilot projects to put lessons learned about resilient community planning into practice. In conclusion, if we recognize stakeholders are essential to all projects and do this approach well, climate change creates the opportunity to recenter building with communities and nature to create healthier, more adaptive, and more equitable cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. I think we have, we would like to use, we don't really have, we would like to use just a couple of minutes to have a quick discussion, and I have a question also for you that we can include in the discussion. So if Martin and Pieter could join us, we know that Emiel had to leave earlier. Just a comment, because we've heard how important stakeholders engagement and actually proactive engagement is. But we also have heard, and it's common knowledge, that it's a lot of energy, a lot of work, and I'm going to say a provocative word, that sometimes a waste of time. How can we take away that, or how can we convince that that's probably not the case, on top of what you already told us in the presentation? Just a final remark on, I think that's not common knowledge, but it's something that's in the mind of many. Maybe Justine first, because you just finished your presentation.
Yeah, sure. I think, the use of time on stakeholder engagement, particularly when you're talking about a visioning plan, stakeholder engagement is the center of the project. And there is no project without engagement, because how can you create a vision that doesn't speak to all of your stakeholders' goals and priorities, particularly when you're talking about a neighborhood scale and you're talking about the future of that neighborhood? So I think, there really, in this case, is no project without your stakeholders. And it's not something that slows things down or creates a risk, but really a great opportunity.
What do you think, Martin, of Pieter?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe I can shortly comment from the viewpoint of a scientist, because it is a bit ambivalent as a scientist, because, well, it's big fun, of course, to be involved in stakeholder processes. It's really important to be involved, and actually as a scientist you have a very important role, because you deliver information, and objective information, and facts and figures. But at the same time, well, it is indeed time consuming and distracting you from what you feel is really important, I mean, doing the science. So it's really an ambivalent trajectory as a scientist.
Yeah, and then maybe adding the NGO perspective, our opinion is that if you have a large engineering project, it's not a question if you have to engage local stakeholders, including communities, but rather how. What we see is there can be two things happening. Some projects get bogged down in resistance and never happen, or take a long time to materialize. And then there's also many examples in many countries where projects are pushed through, but either do not provide the required solution because they're not supported locally and they don't meet the needs of the local stakeholders, or they are implemented, but they breach the rights of the local stakeholders and, for example, deprive them of their fishing grounds. And yeah, with that in mind, a pragmatic approach where you do a long-term visioning with all kinds of local stakeholders involved, and then as part of that process, step by step, implement elements of that long-term vision, to us sounds like the future of engineering. And yeah, we feel that building with nature approaches, because of their holistic nature and because of the fact that you bring in people from different disciplines, is very well suited to make sure that this way of working trickles down more and more within the engineering sector.
Yeah, and then I think I can follow on that, because Emiel is not here, but I've also worked in part of a project I'm doing is part of the Eems-Dollard 2050, and I think it's part of my experience is that that's also a bridge to the next part of the webinar. Stakeholders also improve the financial feasibility of the project. People are focused often on finance as well. How can we make the project, well, where are the resources for the project? If you're able to combine the objectives of different stakeholders in a project, they are probably keen to be part of that and to be proactively part of that, and at times also to pay for part of it. So I think this active interaction I saw in the program of Emiel helps to justify the project. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that as well. If you saw that, for example, in New York also, that even more resources came at picture because you also improved the city. Yeah, I guess
I can start briefly. Yeah. I think, you know, sometimes we talked about a vision, but we also talked about kind of a set of near-term actions that could be implemented by fewer actors or on a shorter-term basis. But I think what we see in this project, but also in other projects that move toward implementation, is that oftentimes by bringing stakeholders together and by finding a common ground, you're actually more able to implement projects because you find a way to connect the project at hand to your stakeholders' larger mission or priorities or goals. And that without that alignment, you know, there isn't the critical urgency or interest to move projects forward.
I think with that answer, we also have a little bridge to the next enabler, the business case. So I want to thank you all very much. It was a very inspiring presentation and also for the discussion.